So, have you noticed something kind of weird happening online lately? Authors who've been dead for decades, some for a whole century, are suddenly all over your social media feeds. We're talking Franz Kafka, Sylvia Plath, George Orwell. Writers famous for their really bleak, heavy themes. And now they're trending right alongside the latest viral dance. It's a strange and fascinating thing to see. And this just perfectly captures it, doesn't it? Kafka, the guy who was the absolute master of existential dread, is now literally the face on birthday cakes. His super gloomy, anxious face. It's this insane contrast that really makes you stop and think, what in the world is going on here? How did the author who wrote about a dude turning into a giant bug become so memeable?
And that's really the big question we're going to dig into. Why did these voices from the past, who were writing about feeling alone, about oppressive systems, and just deep personal despair, why do they feel like they're talking directly to us right now? Well, the answer tells us a whole lot more about our world today than you might think.
All right, let's start with the man of the moment, Franz Kafka. If there's one single feeling his work absolutely nails, it's this very specific, modern kind of anxiety. You know the one? It's tied directly to our obsession with work, with being productive. He was writing 100 years ago, just as the world was turning into this maze of corporations and faceless systems, and somehow he saw exactly where we were headed.
We've all heard the word Kafkaesque, right? We use it when we're stuck in some frustrating automated phone menu or at the DMV. But it's actually deeper than that. It's not just that something's complicated, it's that feeling of being totally powerless against these illogical systems that make zero sense. Systems that honestly feel like they were designed just to grind you into dust.
And this is the perfect, most mind-bending example. So Gregor Samsa wakes up one morning and he's turned into a monstrous vermin. And what's his first thought? Not, oh my God, I'm a giant bug. No, it's panic. Panic that he's going to miss his train and his boss is going to be mad. He is literally an insect, but his entire identity is still just being a worker. And that is the heart of what Kafka was getting at. This very modern fear that our worth as people is measured only by what we produce.
And listen, this isn't just some abstract literary idea. This is a real quote from someone on Reddit talking about the book. They're going through cancer treatment, and yet the pressure they're feeling is about getting back to work, about making sure their illness doesn't tank their productivity. I mean, it is a heartbreakingly modern and totally Kafkaesque problem to have.
Another user just summed it up perfectly. If you strip away all the weirdness, the Metamorphosis is really just a story about a guy whose value is tied only to how useful he is. The second Gregor can't work anymore, the second he can't provide for his family, he becomes a burden, something to be locked away. It taps into this deep, deep fear that our value, even our right to be loved, is totally conditional on what we can contribute. Okay, so let's build on that. If Kafka captures the anxiety of having to produce, Sylvia Plath captures a different but just as modern anxiety, that soul-crushing paralysis that comes from having way too many choices. So in her novel, The Bell Jar, Plath gives us this absolutely incredible metaphor of a fig tree. Her main character, Esther, sees her whole future laid out before her. And every single fig on this tree is a different life she could have. A poet, a professor, a wife and mother, an explorer, and they all look amazing.
But here's the trap. The problem isn't a lack of options, it's that there are so many. If she chooses one fig, all the other figs, all those other possible lives, are gone forever. And so faced with this massive decision and the fear of picking the wrong one, Esther just sits there. She can't choose. And while she's paralyzed, waiting, all the figs start to rot and fall off the tree, uneaten.
It is no wonder this passage has completely blown up online. Think about it. We live in a world of endless social media feeds showing us a million perfectly curated lives we could be living. The pressure to choose the single perfect path is just immense. It's that feeling of being totally overwhelmed by possibility, terrified that any choice you make closes the door on something better. That's the melancholia of a generation. So we've got the internal pressures of productivity and choice. But what about the external systems shaping our lives? Well, for that, we've got to turn to George Orwell and his terrifyingly accurate vision of mass surveillance. So, writing right after World War II, with all these totalitarian regimes rising, Orwell imagined this terrifying toolkit for control in 1984. You've got telescreens in every home watching and listening 24/7. The thought police hunt down anyone who even thinks a rebellious thought. There's even a whole new language, newspeak, designed to make dissent literally impossible to think. And you have to understand, all of it, every single piece, was aimed at one thing: total state control. Now this comparison, this is where it gets really chilling. Orwell imagined a world where surveillance was forced on people. Telescreens were tools of a brutal, oppressive state. Today, we carry devices that watch and listen to us everywhere we go, except we call them smartphones. We willingly put them in our homes and call them smart speakers. We've gone from overt, forced control to this much more subtle kind of surveillance that we often accept voluntarily, all for the sake of convenience.
And this has created this really fascinating and kind of disturbing idea: the electronic self. Every click, every search, every like, every place you go, it all adds up to create this digital version of you. But this second self, it isn't really owned by you. It's a product, owned and sold by corporations.
And if you think that sounds a little too sci-fi, well, here it is in black and white. These are the companies we use every single day, and this is just a tiny sample of the data they collect. Our online activity, our private messages, even our saved conversations. Orwell's big brother was the government. Our big brother is a huge government corporate alliance.
So we've got all these massive anxieties floating around about work, about choice, about privacy. And it can feel totally overwhelming, right? Like we're just lost in a world that's too complicated to even understand. But that is exactly why these authors are making such a comeback. They don't just describe the problems, they give us the words to fight back.
And this is the key. This is the whole thing, right here. Kafka, Plath, and Orwell, they give us a vocabulary, a shared language that lets us name the strange, unsettling forces that are shaping our lives.
Think about it. When you call a pointless meeting at work Kafkaesque, you're not just complaining, you're identifying a specific kind of soul-crushing absurdity. When you call a new surveillance tech Orwellian, you're tapping into this deep, shared understanding of what's really at stake. And when you talk about fig tree paralysis, you're giving a name to that uniquely modern feeling of being frozen by too much potential.
And this brings us right back to the memes and the birthday cakes. This whole memification thing, it's not about dumbing these authors down. It's actually a really sophisticated way of coping. Just like this quote says, by using dark humor and irony, people are taking these huge, overwhelming feelings and making them manageable.
In other words, a meme about Gregor Samsa being late for work isn't just a silly joke. It's a shared signal. It's a way of saying, hey, I feel this pressure, this absurdity too. And just like that, it turns your private anxiety into a public, shared experience. It's basically a way of laughing together in the dark.
Kafka himself wrote that a book should be the axe for the frozen sea inside us. What a powerful image, right? He believed the whole point of literature was to break through that numbness, that feeling of being frozen and isolated that we all get.
And in the end, that's why these authors stick around. They take these feelings that can make us feel utterly alone, the anxiety, the paralysis, the feeling of being watched, and they put words to them. And when we read them, we realize these aren't just our private little battles. They are collective struggles, shared across time. We are not the first people to feel this way.
So I'll leave you with this one last thought, which comes straight from the source material. Orwell imagined a world where our freedom was taken from us by force. But in our endless quest for convenience, for connection, for efficiency, have we actually ended up in a world where we just willingly give it all away? It's a pretty chilling thought, and it's one these timeless authors are still forcing us to confront.